19 hours without sleep makes you as impaired as someone over the legal drink drive limit in most countries. And still, you tell yourself you are fine. That is the strange little bargain. Not with the night exactly. With yourself. You keep going because the body does not send a dramatic warning at the start. It just quietly lowers the standard. You know the ritual, the alarm goes off. You hit it once, then again, and the day begins already behind glass. You stand in the kitchen looking at the same mug as if it might explain your life. You open your phone for just a second and somehow arrive at a message you meant to answer yesterday. Then a calendar, then a tab about something vaguely useful that now feels urgent. You are not falling apart, that is the problem. You are functioning well enough to call it normal. And because it still looks like normal from the outside, you start calling it personality. Late night person, busy person, easily tired but capable. You turn depletion into a style. You wear it like a neutral color. I did this last week. I spent 20 minutes rearranging a to-do list instead of doing the one thing on it, which felt almost responsible in the moment. Then I called that a working morning. What running on empty does is not dramatic. That is why it gets away with so much. It does not announce itself with a collapse. It makes you accept smaller versions of yourself. A slower reply feels acceptable. A half-read email feels acceptable. A decision made with blurred attention feels acceptable. The bar does not fall all at once. It sinks one small inch at a time, and you only notice, after enough inches have gone missing, that the floor feels different. That is why this kind of tiredness is so useful to hide inside. Nobody around you has to know. You can still send the email. You can still show up to the meeting. You can still say the sentence that sounds like you, but the sentence is shorter than it should be. The patience is thinner. The memory is loose at the edges. You reach for a word and it is not where it lives. You reached for your phone while I was talking, didn't you? Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania found something miserable and useful here. People getting 6 hours of sleep per night for 1 week were as impaired as someone who had not slept in 24 hours. 6 hours does not sound like a crisis. That is the trap. It sounds like the kind of night most adults can survive. It sounds like a small sacrifice, but the cost arrives in the ordinary places. You take a route you always take and miss a turn. You answer too quickly and only later realize you agreed to something you did not mean. You reread the same paragraph 3 times and still keep the wrong version in your head. The limitation is simple. One study cannot tell you exactly how your own week will unfold, but it can tell you that the feeling of manageable is not a reliable witness. And that is the first thing tiredness steals, your ability to judge tiredness. That part matters more than the yawning, more than the heavy eyelids. Because if you still trust your own evaluation, you will keep using your internal meter as if it were accurate. It is not. That is what Van Dongen and colleagues showed again in their work at the University of Pennsylvania. People running on too little sleep consistently rated themselves as fine. Their test scores told a different story, not slightly different. Different enough to be dangerous. Different enough that the person who says, "I have got it," may be the last one to know they do not. You can feel how that becomes a life problem, not just a sleep problem. If you are the person who always says yes, you are likely saying yes with less actual capacity than you think. If you are the person who prides yourself on handling things, you may be handling them in a way that quietly costs you later. You forget the appointment, then blame your memory. You send the text with the wrong name, then blame distraction. You leave the groceries in the car because going back out feels absurdly difficult and then blame the day. It looks like character. It is often just a tired nervous system dressed up in your usual clothes. The weird part is that fatigue rarely feels like fatigue at the beginning. It feels like mild irritation, like a slight need to scroll, like needing more coffee than you wanted, like everything taking longer than it should. It feels, in other words, like your own personality has gotten a little less generous. So you start identifying with the version of yourself that exists after too little sleep. You say, "I'm just not a morning person," when the truth is more embarrassing and more ordinary. You are a person whose brain is trying to run a full day on a lower battery, and the operating system has begun quietly closing things. And because the damage is slow, it gets moralized. If you miss something, you think you were careless. If you snap at someone, you think you were stressed. If you read a message and forget to reply, you think you are becoming flaky. Sometimes that is how the story feels from inside. But the cause is often simpler. Not better, simpler. The cost of too little sleep is not only that you feel bad, it is that you start explaining away the evidence of being worn down, as if it were some stable truth about who you are. That is where the first research finding lands in a very personal way. If 19 hours awake can put you in the same range of impairment as someone over the legal drink drive limit in most countries, then the issue is not whether you feel reckless. The issue is that your confidence can stay intact while your judgment slips. The limitation is worth saying plainly. That comparison does not mean every tired person is the same, and it does not turn a normal, rough morning into a medical emergency. But it does strip away the comforting lie that "I still feel okay" means I am okay. It is strange how much of modern life rewards this lie. Being tired can look like commitment, it can look like ambition, it can look like being the kind of person who pushes through. So the behavior keeps getting reinforced. You get praised for answering late night emails. You get praised for being available. You get praised for making it work. Meanwhile, the actual cost shows up somewhere less flattering. You order the wrong thing because you are not really reading. You miss a detail in a document and have to fix it later. You promise to call someone and forget until the next day when the delay has already done its work. At some point, the tired version of you becomes the one you plan around. That is the quiet disaster. You build your life around reduced capacity and call it a schedule. You leave extra time for everything because you know you will move slowly. You keep easier tasks on the list because harder ones feel impossible before lunch. You do this long enough, and the tired version starts to feel normal. A little flat, a little foggy, still you. It helps to notice how physically ordinary all of this looks. Not like collapse, more like a stack of plates balanced too carefully on a narrow shelf. Nothing dramatic happens until one small bump. Or like a phone at 4% battery, still lit up, still usable, and still tricking you into thinking there is room. That is the trap with running on no sleep. It does not ask for attention in a way that feels urgent. It asks for permission by degrees. And you keep granting it because the alternative seems exaggerated. The cost is not only personal either, it spills outward in boring, practical ways. You reread a bill and still miss the number that matters. You buy the wrong item because you had the right intention but not enough attention. You agree to pick up something on the way home and then realize too late that you have forgotten where you put the list, the receipt, or the thought itself. None of this feels like a catastrophe in the moment. That is precisely why it repeats. The damage is small enough to excuse and frequent enough to shape your week. And then there is the shame loop. Once you have done enough of these small things, you start expecting them. You start saying, "I'm terrible today," when the real sentence is closer to, "I have been under-rested for so long." That ordinary tasks now feel like a test. That distinction matters because shame pushes you to blame your character, while tiredness asks for a different move entirely. Not a lecture, not a grand new identity, a change in conditions. So the useful shift is not to promise yourself that you will become a new person by tomorrow. It is to stop treating sleep like the leftover part of your day. Put a cutoff on the work you keep pretending does not count. Put the phone outside the room if that is what it takes to stop the endless little reopening of the day. If you know you get weirdly optimistic at night, do not make important decisions there. Write them down and revisit them after actual rest. The point is not purity. It is to stop making decisions from the thinnest version of your mind, and then acting surprised when they do not hold. This works because it breaks the habit of using your tired judgment to negotiate with your tired body. Right now, the exhausted version of you keeps making promises to the future version of you, and the future version keeps arriving with the bill. So move the promise earlier. Move the choice earlier. Make the decision before the battery drops. That way you are not asking a worn-out brain to prove it is still a reliable guide, while it is busy proving the opposite. And here's the part nobody likes hearing because it is too close to home. You do not always need a dramatic reason for why the day went badly. Sometimes the day was not bad. Sometimes you just ran the whole thing on empty and filed it under personality. That is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all the smaller ones. The just like this story is often built out of mornings that started too late, nights that ended too early, and a mind you kept asking to do serious work while it was still catching up with itself, which is why the first thing that changes is not your ambition. It is your tolerance for pretending. The next time you wake up with that foggy, slightly delayed feeling and still try to force the usual pace, notice what you are really doing. You are not proving strength. You are normalizing a lowered bar. You are teaching yourself to call less enough. You are making fine smaller. And then, because the day still has to be lived, you do the one quiet thing that matters. You stop trusting the version of you that is always most confident when it is most deprived. You give yourself a better condition before asking for a better result. You take the note off the kitchen counter. You close the laptop at a time that feels almost childish. You let the message wait until morning, not because you have become disciplined, because you finally noticed how many of your problems start when the day gets built by a tired mind trying to look awake. 19 hours without sleep. And the strange part is not that it changes you. It is how long you can keep acting like it hasn't.